You first need to open the video that is being streamed live. Look for the chat box on the side or bottom of the video player. This is where you can type your message. Click inside the chat box and use your keyboard to type out what you want to say. You can type words, use emojis, or even ask questions. Once you've typed your message, press the Enter key on your keyboard or click the Send button. Your comment will then appear in the chat for everyone watching the live stream to see. If you want to send another comment, just type it in the chat box again and press Enter or Send. Your new comment will show up below your previous one.
The politics of Cuba and Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean, as well as headmastership or headmistressship, principalship. That's it for us today. Politics and education. Caribbean political leaders could lose their U.S. visas if they continue with programs to use Cuban health workers in their countries. The Trump administration says this could be so, as it says the practice involves human trafficking. Some Caribbean leaders have said, frankly speaking, no way they will abandon the Cubans. Take back the visas if you wish, they say. Good day. Here is one Caribbean leader who has stood up already.
We rely a lot for our health care delivery on certain specialists who over the decades we have obtained from India, from the Philippines, sometimes from Africa, and mainly from Cuba. Out of the blue now we are being called human traffickers because we hire technical people who we pay top dollar equal to local rates, but we are now being accused of taking part in the program where people are being exploited. That's somebody's interpretation. And of course, there are local people here encouraging them to take away our US visas. Today, I just came back from California. And if I never there again in my life, I will ensure that the sovereignty of Trinidad and Tobago is known to its people and respected by all.
That's Prime Minister Keith Rowley, the outgoing Prime Minister Keith Rowley of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, good day. We will discuss the conundrum from a continuing Cuba-US stalemate later in this podcast. And this past week, there was the opening of the 2025-26 budget debate. Frankly speaking, there was no fireworks or no string of goodies lining the path to elections. More importantly, though, frankly speaking, there was nothing transformational. Now, let's use that word again, overworked word as it is, transformational. There was nothing there that's going to change Jamaica in the short or long term. Not from Minister of Finance Favour Williams, nor from our opposition counterpart, Julian Robinson. But we'll start with a look at our education system, which, frankly speaking, needs transformation. Just to remind you, please share the link to this podcast with your friends and colleagues. This same link takes you to the recorded program on YouTube. Please subscribe. We invite your comments during the show, and you may send them as shown earlier. You may also send WhatsApp text to 876-503-9995. Thank you. Our regular panelists, Desmond Richards and Winnie Anderson-Brown, they are here with us today. We thank them. We are joined by educator, former journalist, and broadcaster, Darien Henry. Dr. Henry is principal of Montego Bay Community College, MBCC. He has just completed a doctoral thesis that had at its center the principle, at least the preparation of the principle, and the significance of such a person to the education system. Welcome, Dr. Henry. Please give us a brief synopsis of what you were examining and what you found of relevance to the broader public in your study.
Thank you very much, Franklin. Good afternoon to you and the members of your panel, and of course, your viewers. Let me start with a fundamental truth, Franklin and panelists. The success of any school really hinges on the quality of its leadership. While teachers are at the heart of student achievement, research confirms that the principal ranks second only to the teacher in their influence on academic outcomes. In a rapidly evolving educational landscape, principals are no longer just administrators. They are expected to be strategic visionaries, instructional leaders, and of course, crisis managers. However, the reality is that many principals step into the roles without the necessary preparation. And this gap, Franklin and panelists, has real consequences for student success. This brings us to the fundamental question. How do we prepare principals to meet the complex demands of modern education? The research I conducted on Jamaica's Aspiring Principals program sought to evaluate whether we are truly...
Sorry, and just tell us, the Aspiring Principal
Yes.
program is what? What is that?
This is the marquee administrative preparation program of the National College of Educational Leadership. But I want to...
NCEL.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to put some background before we go into the dearth of the study, because what's important is that one of the central issues we face is that many school leaders are put into the role without sufficient training in the key areas like financial management, legal issues, stakeholder engagement, and crisis management. And while some of this learning actually happens on the job, the lack of formalized and ongoing professional development leaves many struggling to keep up with this increasing role that the role demands. Additionally, we must bridge the gap between leadership training and real-world improvement. And too often, Franklin, professional development is seen as an event rather than a continuous process. And if we want to see real transformation, you mentioned that earlier, there has to be systematic, sustained training that aligns with the evolution of education as it stands, right? So the truth is, the education system across the region is now facing tremendous amount of pressures, including teacher migration, including declining birth rates, including technological disruptions, and of course, socioeconomic disparities. So without strong leadership, our schools will struggle to respond effectively to some of these challenges. And it is imperative that we rethink how we select, how we train, how we support our school principals to ensure that they're not just managers, Franklin, but they are transformative leaders.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. But you said something there which I want to hold on to. You suggested that the success of the school depends on the leadership, depends on the principal. Do you stand by that regardless of what that principal gets to work with, regardless of the quality of students going into that school, regardless of the state of the school plan? Do you stand by that the principal is a driving force in the success of the school?
The truth is, Franklin, the principal plays two very important roles. One, he's a chief instructional leader. So as a chief instructional leader, that person is expected to drive the operation of the school so that students are achieving. They're also the chief executive of the board of management, so they have operational oversight. The code of regulations, as old as it is, it bestows tremendous amount of discretion on the principal to drive sustained operation in a school environment. And these are complex because you're managing people, you're managing people's emotions, you're managing systems that manage people, and of course, you're managing a complex system that revolves around getting our students ready. That's a very complex undertaking, Franklin. So to answer your question, the principal must be the one that sends that unmistakable signal. That principal is the big thinker. He has to be, because he is the cacophony of leadership in the institution. He's the one that galvanizes all the team, all the resources to make the students work. So in answer to your question...
Let me come back to you before Winnie comes in, because she has been writing on education, and she's an educator of how many years I used to train teachers and all of that. I'm asking you, given the fact that some principals get into their schools, lower level children who they must get to a certain level, lower, very, very low level, have terrible school plans, hot, rainy, leaky, few desks, etc., and get teachers which are not at a certain level. Is that still the most important factor for school success? Should we hold him responsible?
You have to. There is nobody else you can hold responsible. That is the accountable person. That's the accountable officer. That's the person who will drive the change. That's the person who will make it all happen. Now, the truth is, and what's behind my study, is that if you are not able to be prepared, if you're not prepared to take on this complex role of dealing with a dysfunctional plant, or students who are not learning, or students who display constant behavioral dysfunctionalities, then you're going to be in challenges. And what you're finding now is that the school system, there are more demands on the principal to perform. There are more demands to make sure that all the systems in the school work. Now, the question that I want you to ask is whether or not it is absolutely important that the principal gets sustained support. Some principals are given baskets to carry water, proverbial baskets to carry water. But the truth is, there are some high-performing principals, as I've proven in my study, that they've been able to literally turn water into wine, literally turn water into wine. So if that principal does not have that personal agency and able to command the school community in such a way to pull together the resources, to pull together the ideas, to pull all the necessary features of the school system, then they're going to be in challenges.
Before Winnie comes in, last week, I paid a visit to my only school, the Muros Primary School in St. Anne. And one of the things I discovered, the number of students at the school, and in talking to the teachers and the principal and other residents, I find out something, that the declining birth rate in the country is having an impact on the number of students attending schools. Dr. Henry, is that a sign? Have you come across anything like that?
In fact, the data continues to prove that we will see a sustained fall off in our birth rates, at least for the next 10 to 15 years. And this is precisely, Desmond, one of the points that I make about context-sensitive leadership preparation. Principals will now have to prepare themselves to lead schools with declining birth rates. How do you configure your school operations to meet this kind of phenomena? And this is not a Jamaican thing, by the way. Developed and developing countries continue to face this very issue. But the crux of the argument that I'm making is that these very issues, not just declining birth rates, but people are moving out of the communities. There are declining businesses as well. And the structures that would support the schools are also declining. But Franklin and Desmond, the principal is still expected to perform. And in performing, that principal has to be prepared to come up with the strategies, come up with groundbreaking solutions to ensure that the school is sustained and remains sustainable in such circumstances. Because I can tell you, Desmond, where the data is now, the decline in birth rate is not expected to ease anytime soon.
Wow.
Okay, let's take this comment before I say anything. Dear Grace, yes, she says some principals are threatened by young aspiring teachers who ask them to be transparent and accountable. So would you respond to that?
Yeah, I'd like to respond
before
to that.
I even say anything.
I continue to hear comments like those. Now, each school context is different. So you can't use a broad brush statement to say, because you have aspiring young bright teachers, principals are threatened. Let me begin by saying, Winnie and Grace, that the principal's job is extremely difficult. And when I say difficult, it is perhaps one of the most difficult jobs to do, because you're managing people, you're managing systems that manage people, and you're managing the learning process. And that by itself is highly complex and technical. Now, the truth is, in many schools, the principal is responsible to send a signal about the culture that is engendered in that institution. No, that's a difficult balance, It's a very, very difficult balance. And I hope no one comes with the argument that male principals and female principals perceive things differently and so on. Rubbish. All the studies does not prove that there's a difference in competence. But the truth is that principal will have to ensure that he has that personal agency, the charisma, the ability to communicate, the ability to articulate a vision, the ability to solve complex problems while remaining cool and calm.
And what you're talking about there? You're talking
Yes.
about colleges at college level like yours, or you're talking about small primary schools, medium primary schools? Or are you just talking about colleges?
The truth is, it's no different at the college level. And let me put that on the table, because I did serve as a high school principal, and I know I'm serving as a tertiary principal. And the issues are virtually the same, because you're managing systems, you're managing very complex systems, and you're managing personalities and different ideologies about how the principal should be and how the school should be and how the school should be led. And then the other dimension to it, again, as Winnie and Franklin, the dimension of the governance arrangement for the institution. Many principals face uphill tasks in terms of their relationship with their boards and their board chairmen. You heard in the news quite recently what happened at a school in Region 4. So it's a very complex undertaking, and that's why there has to be absolute care in terms of preparing that principal. And the truth is, in deploying that absolute care, one must argue and one must understand the realities of the school complex. That's why even after you train the principal, Winnie, how you onboard the principal, and that's another area of gap in our system. In many of our publicly owned institutions, principals are not onboarded properly. They're not onboarded properly.
We're going to come back to you to onboard.
Let's go to, I am going to
I see some comments coming in, so go ahead.
Rubian Forbes. Rubian, let's hear what Rubian has to say. She says some principals are politically appointed with no experience in leadership. Some are given basket to carry water, lack of resources, and some don't have the children's interest at heart. That's what Rubian says. And Gia Grace, she commented before, she said they don't want your ideas, they want friends. And Petrona McLeod, she's just saying good afternoon. Yes, she continues to say some principals are too busy trying to please parents while making it that should be hard, I guess, for teachers. Some are busy trying to use appraisals to get rid of teachers. I think that should be rid. Yes.
Winnie, you go ahead with your comments now. We want to hear you.
Well, okay. First of all, what I will say is this. Having taught at all levels of the education system, I say this. Any day you can sit on top of your head is the day someone who is not the leader will be able to exercise that kind of influence over the school. Regardless of your wonderful ideas, unless the leader buys into it, it goes nowhere without the leader. So in that broad sense, the leader, the quality of the leader makes all the difference. And I'll give you one example. And I won't name the teachers' college, but at that college, the principal at one time, she did not believe in the students wearing uniforms. So as long as that principal was there, that college did not wear uniforms. As soon as there was a new principal, the students were wearing uniforms. The members of staff, they were divided, but most people were comfortable with uniforms. But the principal was not for uniforms.
Yes. But Winnie, that seems to support the idea that the principal must be strong and carry the school.
Absolutely.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
And frankly, that's a point.
That's Winnie, exactly what I'm saying. And that is why I said, I'm sorry, Darren. That's exactly why I said, any morning you get up and find that you can sit on top of your head, that is the time you will be able to influence the school more than the principal can.
Yeah. Let me just, quickly just reflect on some of the comments that were made, and it exemplifies the point I'm making, that the role of principal is extremely complex, and there is a balancing act the principal has to carry out every single day, and that's why principals ought to be supported continuously. One of the points I made in my paper is for us to consider a licensing regime, not for additional bureaucracy, but there has to be a platform for continuous support and professional development. Sending a principal into a school after doing...
you mean licensing a principal? You mean a man who doesn't have a license can't be a principal?
No, listen to the argument I'm making, Franklin, because I was very careful when I made the argument in chapter 5. The fact that a one-off program, and all the studies prove that, one-off training in 6 months or 9 months is not enough to carry a principal, is not enough to support that principal in a very complex and explosive school environment. Some schools you go to, is highly explosive and toxic, right? Man or woman, it's toxic. And that principal walks a very tight rope to manage relationships. And if that principal don't manage himself, he'll find himself in a particular toxic vortex where the school explodes. So that's why that principal has to get continuous support. He don't know everything. Even me as a tertiary principal, I continue to go to professional development opportunities. I go to the conferences. Why? I have to remain relevant and remain prepared so I can treat with the complexities that come, because it will never stop. It will never stop.
But let's just take you on there. I mean,
sure.
You mentioned you are coming from, and we're going to just introduce briefly a personal note. You were at Cumberland at one time.
Very difficult school.
Yeah.
Very difficult school.
Secondary school.
Secondary school, yes.
Lots of difficulty and so forth. What skills were you prepared with to go to a school like that?
I'm glad you mentioned Cumberland, because Cumberland is just a different kind of experience, and it telegraphs the idea I'm talking about. If I didn't prepare myself to go to Cumberland, I'd be an abject failure. So in addition to my own personal competence, yes, you have to go there to understand how to manage school relations, manage interpersonal relations, because that's really the crux of it, because if the students aren't learning, it means that there are other things that are happening. When I went to Cumberland, one of the things I had to deal with was a noisy school. It was chaotic. Timetable wasn't ready. I remember I went there in August and October. Timetable wasn't ready. Teachers weren't deployed, all of that. I didn't really and truly have first-hand knowledge, but guess what I did? I pulled the team together. I said, listen, how do we solve this problem? Where is the timetable? How do we plot the classes properly? How do we plot our grade 7 classes? How many teachers do we have to deploy? All of that. It's a complex undertaking. No, there are other things happening at Cumberland, and somebody mentioned in the comments a while ago about principals being chosen on a political basis. There's nowhere in law, nowhere in the code of regulation that it says that the principal is chosen on political means. There's a process for the appointment of principal. There may be other things happening in the school environment which speaks for itself, but the process for the selection of principal is outlined in law, right there in the code of regulation.
Yeah, man, but what you say? What
Who follows that?
You are contesting the person's view that
I am contesting the
principals
view.
are chosen on a political basis.
Who follows
no
that?
evidence. Hold on, Winnie. I do not have any evidence before me, and I've seen none, and I've studied literally all the school systems here in Jamaica, that any principal have been appointed on political means.
You're joking with life.
I am telling you. Hold on.
Study, so I'm not going to contest.
Hold on.
Joking with life.
Yeah.
I can go back.
The inference is that the principal is selected based on politics, and I'm saying the process does not support that. Whether or not there are issues behind
I'm not going to
the
tie down.
scenes.
I'm not going to tie you down in there.
We have so many comments. We have so many comments. Let's get the comments in. Let's get the comments in. We have quite a few of them. Help me, Joshua. Yes. Petrona McLeod says some principals are too busy trying to please parents while making. We read that already.
Yeah, you did read that already.
Yes, I did read that. George Brown JP says there are political council members, especially the board chairman
No
having
talking.
their
No
political
talking.
agenda
No
and is
talking.
interfering with the operation of the school, there are board chairmen, I suppose, who will take over as that's not complete. Okay, and dear Grace comes back. I've worked at all levels and genders. Many principals lack vision.
Very
Well,
important
that's
point.
true.
It's
Yes.
a very important. Let me just
Let's
just
try
add a
this one.
comment
Let
here.
me read
Yeah.
one more. Let me read one more.
Yes.
Yes, let me read one more. Bell Ringer says Rubian from the international immemorial from
Family
time immemorial,
Yes.
politics like everywhere else in Jamaica has been contaminating the Jamaican education system. Why are MPs appointing board chairmen? Okay, so that's a
The
different
MPs
level.
do not
It's a
appoint
level
board
above the
chairmen.
All right,
principal.
Darien, you go. I'm sorry.
Let me.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Darien.
Darien.
Running
I
out of
think
time.
that we have to put some
Different
things into
level.
context. And Franklin, I really have to congratulate you on maintaining a platform like this so that ordinary persons can really and truly get to the truth and understand. The truth is, members of parliament by law do have a say in the nominated members on the school board. They make the recommendations to the NCE and the minister appoints them. We don't talk about that. Now, what I want to advance is that there has to be greater care in choosing board members. More care. There has to be an understanding of personalities. Too much. That's the issue right now.
Yes.
Many principals are
Right
being
there.
blamed because they don't have vision and so on, but they don't talk about the complexities behind the scenes where some board chairmen want to take over the school, some board
Yes.
chairmen contaminate the teaching and learning process. That's what we need to talk about, and not many
A strong
principals can
principal will
overcome
be able
that.
to handle that, man. But
Well,
No,
some will be able to handle that.
Not
But I
Sorry,
want to ask
no.
you, Winnie said no, but I want to ask you something quick.
Sure.
We promoted this program outside of your consent and knowledge. And we promoted it. Is it failing school or failing principal? If a school is failing, it means that the principal is failing. Am I correct? If a school in Jamaica is failing, it means the principal is failing. Am I correct?
And I'm going to answer you by saying that some years ago, when I was being trained to be a school inspector, we struggled with that very same issue. If a school is failing, if a school is struggling, and a principal is performing at optimal level, can we consider that principal a failing principal? The short answer is you can't. In the very same way, you can't blame teachers on a whole for the outcome of student in a broad sense, because there are many issues, there are many moving parts that are happening behind the scenes. There is this argument, I think the Gleaner was pushing this argument about performance-based pay. I'm one of those who are not for the performance-based pay, because until we can fix the resource issues, until we can fix the preparation issues, until we can fix the political issues, and Franklin, I really hope you have another discussion about board chairman, boards, and school leadership and all of that. Until we fix those issues, we cannot label that principal a failing principal.
But
He's in a
you
difficult.
said principals can make miracles. You said principals get water, turn water
and the
into
best
wine.
prepared principal is able
Franklin,
to pull
exceptional
his
cases,
resources.
those,
The best prepared principal can push, can stretch their school resources to the point where they make the impact. I am an example of that. I did go to Cumberland High School and students were performing even despite the most difficult circumstances. Who I had with me? The Parent Teachers Association. And they were there with me, lock, stock, and barrel. Yes, so that's how you make change. It is not going to be linear, Franklin and panelists. It can't be linear. The job is difficult. You have to prepare them. You have to support them. You have to give them the support. That's how you get the thing done. And pull the politics out of board chairman and board and board appointment. Take the politics out of it. Get more involvement from the community. Get involvement of the principal. The principal must have a voice in who sits on the school board. And that's important. We need to have that conversation.
Well, I have two comments from your study. One of the comments is the consequences of school leadership in shaping school success is widely acknowledged, widely acknowledged.
Absolutely.
The consequences of school leadership. In other words, if we are to have good schools properly run, we must have top-rate principals. That is not acceptable.
It has to be, and that's the crux of my study. You must have high quality principals. You must have high quality training. You must have high quality schools, high quality resources for you to have high quality students at the end. It's all complex, you know, Franklin and colleagues. It's all complex. But the truth is, we really have to take a serious look on our system. We can fix it, but do we have the will to fix it?
Dr. Henry, before you go, why is it that so many students are leaving school now illiterate?
That's another story. The comments are many,
discussion.
fast and
That's
furious.
another discussion.
Give us a 30-second answer, Darien, and then we go. Give us a 30-second answer for that.
The truth is, the system needs a serious change. They don't just leave high school that they're not able to read. From the womb, we have to find ways and means to transform how students are prepared. What we have now is an unfortunate conveyor belt system. They come out of the womb, they're not prepared, they're not ready for grade 1, they go up to grade 3, not ready, they go up to grade 5, can't read, and they send them to schools like Cumberland High School, and they struggle over there to get them to read. We have a conveyor belt system that we have to tear apart. Are we prepared to do that?
All right, so that's a big question, Mr. Henry. Thank you so much, Dr. Henry.
Yes, and the comments are fast and furious.
We're going to bring you back because Winnie never even get to start challenging yet. She worked right through the system, as she said. But we thank you very much. We're going to have to bring you back. You move very quickly, but we're going to take on the Cuban healthcare system and so on that we did. Dr. Darien Henry,
looking forward.
Where can people read your study? Where can people read your study?
It's on ProQuest. Just type in my name in Google Scholar or ProQuest. It's right there.
Google Scholar.
Just go to Google Scholar, type in my name, and it's right there.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. All the best.
Thanks. Yes.
That's Dr. Darien Henry. Very interesting. Well, Winnie, so
many comments are here.
And principalship is a very serious thing, and the NCEL work is going on. But as I sent out the promo today, I got a response from somebody who said, you got to have as well active principals to give a pushback against the concept of that you have to be strong and good and NCEL and so forth and so on. But never mind. We are welcoming now Calvin Brown, and I see you have been comments, Winnie. I think those are for the other but we'll take them.
Yes, they are for the
Calvin
first
Brown
half,
is a long-time, well-known journalist, publisher, and editor of Wired. Wired is an online news service that takes care of the Caribbean. It's full of Caribbean information, full of news features about the Caribbean people and our thinking. And we wanted him to help us talk now about this matter of Caribbean leaders, political leaders, prime ministers, it seems the Trump administration is saying, could lose their visa if they continue having these Cubans taking them from Cuba in their countries. Calvin, go ahead, take it over, please, and welcome.
Good afternoon. I have quite interesting. I was listening to Darien's presentation. I had been a chairman of a school board for about 10 years at Anchovy High. But the next time I want to be on your panel because I have some serious discussions in respect of the schools. Anyway, the recent threat by the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, regarding our nation's long-standing cooperation with the Cuban medical missions is extremely important to the Caribbean. For over 60 years, Cuban doctors, nurses, and medical technologists have formed the backbone of the healthcare system across the Caribbean islands to the sons and daughters of ex-slaves. When our hospitals faced shortages,
Calvin, sorry, can you speak up a little bit more, please?
yeah, okay. When our hospitals faced shortages, when specialized care was unavailable, and when pandemics threatened our people, it was often the Cuban medical professionals who stood with us in our time of need. Now, Secretary Rubio has announced a policy that would impose visa restrictions on officials who support what he characterized as Cuba's quote-unquote forced labor program. This policy fundamentally misunderstands both the nature of our relationship with Cuba and the sovereignty of Caribbean nations. Let me be absolutely clear about where our leaders stand. Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves of
St. Vincent and the Grenadines
put it plainly when he said, I will prefer to lose my visa than to have 60 poor and working people die. Those aren't empty words. They reflect the reality that Cuban doctors provide critical dialysis.
And Calvin, I just interrupted to say, he pointed out that dialysis, all kidney programs in St. Vincent and the Grenadines were made possible with the Cuban assistance. Without that, he said, lots of people would die.
And that's what I'm telling you. They reflect the reality that Cuban doctors provide critical dialysis treatment to patients who would otherwise have no options. I see you played a clip from Dr. Keith Rowley from Trinidad. He was equally resolute, declaring, I just came back from California, and if I never go there again in my life, I will ensure that the sovereignty of Trinidad and Tobago is known to its people and respected by all. This isn't about
We're going to ask Joshua to play Keith Rowley again in a little while, but you go ahead, sir, please.
Yeah, it isn't about politics. It's about the health and well-being of our citizens. Jamaica currently hosts about 400 Cuban medical professionals. And Grenada, like many of our smaller islands, faces a significant challenge in securing specialist doctors. As Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell emphasized, we have a legitimate partnership with the government and people of Cuba, who have over several decades provided support to the people of Grenada in the medical. The accusation that these medical partnerships constitute what's his name?
Michael Rubio.
Rubio, called human trafficking or exploitation, have been thoroughly rejected by most of our leaders.
Calvin, I don't know if you, I know you've been all over the place and so on, but I don't know if you remember that Cuban assistance, some of it was also afforded in Cuba itself by Jamaicans needing eye care in particular. And more recently, we have set up an operation at St. John's Hospital and so on. But for years, several hospitals, especially rural ones, relied upon Cuban nurses and Cuban doctors. For years before, we have reached a stage now where we are having more. People relied on them. Clinics in Jamaica.
Don't forget
health centers, as
60 years,
know. Depend on Cuban healthcare workers of all kinds.
Precisely.
And frankly, some of our doctors were trained by Cuba.
In Cuba, absolutely.
Yes, they were trained in Cuba.
Well, it is a barefaced invasion of Caribbean sovereignty. That is what it is. And so far, we have heard nothing from our government as it relates to Rubio's assertion. We have heard nothing.
Why do you think that is so, Desmond? Because why do you think that is so?
I don't know. I don't know why it is so. Because
and part of the reason I suspect, I bet it's going to be raised this week Wednesday at press conference. Part of the reason I suspect is that journalists are not holding on to the Prime Minister and to the leader of the opposition and posing those questions directly.
Well, I consider the issue so important that the Prime Minister should not wait for a journalist to ask him that question. He should
let the bell ringer speak.
He should put forward the position, because we know that Jamaica has benefited immensely from the Cuban medical program. We know that. And this is something that is very important. What I would like to know, what will happen to the system if we have to withdraw that 400 medical practitioners?
Desmond is a
so let's hear what the bell ringer has to say about this.
Winnie,
The bell ringer says, I would advise the current ruling administration to tread carefully. Diplomacy is the way out. Our largest export market is the US. The vast majority of tourists who come to Jamaica are from the USA. That's what bell ringer has to say.
Calvin, you want to give us a comment on that? I think you have some more comment there, Winnie, but let me hear Calvin on that. All right, go ahead, Winnie.
Okay, bell ringer again. Kian says almost 800, not 400. That's a correction of figures. And here comes bell ringer again. Over 80% of remittances coming into the country is from the US. I am a US citizen and I am paying for the best.
Good. So Calvin, you want to give us a comment? Because Desmond said it's an important issue. Leadership doesn't have to follow or be dragged by reporters. What's your view on it, Calvin?
Listen, let me tell you something. We have history coming from about 53 years ago. The Caribbean Prime Ministers Errol Barrow, Michael Manley, Forbes Burnham, and Eric Williams faced similar pressures when they were told not to recognize Cuba. Their response then, as many of our prime ministers today, is clear. We are sovereign, independent nations, and we will decide for ourselves what nations we will have relations with. And this position is not about defiance for its own sake. It's about the fundamental right of our nations to determine our own partnerships, especially when they impact the health and survival of our citizens.
Yeah, but what the man is saying, Calvin, is that we are beholden to the US. People consider the US in a particular way, and they are a major trading partner. That's where the tourists come from. That's where Jamaicans are running to. We have nearly 2 million plus Jamaicans live there and their descendants. So tread carefully. And that's what I'm asking you and Desmond to respond to, more than you in 30 seconds.
But treading carefully does not mean that we must do everything. Or, for example, we must deny ourselves medical care in order to suit our partners. That's not a treading carefully mean.
All right, let me give you something.
30 seconds, Calvin. We are on the phone.
Okay, it's important to understand that for over 60 years, Cuba has endured one of the longest running economic embargoes in modern history.
Terrible.
This embargo has severely restricted Cuba's ability to engage in international trade. The Medical Brigade program represents one of the few avenues through which Cuba can engage foreign exchange while circumventing the chokehold of these sanctions. And by sharing its medical expertise internationally, Cuba has created a sustainable model that serves multiple purposes, providing humanitarian aid, building diplomatic relationships, and securing vital economic resources.
Gotta leave it there, Calvin. I thank you. I just want
Hold
to
on
read
there,
it.
one more thing. Let me tell you something. While the exact figures are not published, it is said that Cuba's medical mission generate between $6 to $8 billion annually in revenue, making it the island's largest export service.
We're going to leave our listeners with the words of, because we run out of time, with the words of Mayor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados. And she says, if we cannot reach a sensible agreement on this matter, then if the cost of it is the loss of my visa to the US, then so be it. And there she's on the screen. I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Calvin Brown. Thank you, Darien Henry, Dr. Darien Henry. I remind you all to share this podcast and subscribe. Remember, you can use this same link to get to the recorded version of this podcast later. Thanks also to Desmond Richards and Winnie Anderson Brown. Thanks to Joshua Black of Joshua Black Media Services and all our special guests today. I'm Frankly McKnight. Until then.